Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something a lot of you have been asking about, personal finance.
Yeah, this is going to be great. We got a ton of your sources on the topic.
Yeah, and usually we get a pretty wide range of opinions, but I gotta say, this time around, there's a lot of agreement.
Definitely.
Mm,
Like there's this real push toward being more mindful and intentional with your money, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s.
totally. And look, I was already surprised by some of the stuff we're going to cover today. Like, one article straight up says aggressively paying off student loans might not always be the smartest move.
That's a hot take for sure. There's also some research that throws some serious shade on the whole real estate is a guaranteed win thing.
Oh, yeah, we're definitely getting into that. Plus, we'll dig into some seriously savvy tricks for negotiating a better salary and saving a bunch on big purchases like cars and weddings.
It's about making your money work harder for you. So let's kick things off with a topic that's come up a lot in your sources. Automation. Ooh, automatic money flow. One of the articles called it, which sounds pretty high tech, right?
It might sound futuristic, but the idea is actually really simple. It's all about setting up automatic transfers. You're paying yourself first before you even get a chance to spend the money.
Okay, so kind of like putting my finances on autopilot.
You got it.
Yeah.
It takes all the emotion out of saving, which, let's be honest, can be super tough,
Ugh. Tell me about it.
especially with all the tempting stuff out there.
So you decide once how much you want to save each month, and then the system just takes care of the rest. You don't even have to think about it.
That would be a game changer, honestly.
Oh.
Now let's switch gears and talk investing, which I know can feel super intimidating for a lot of people, especially when they're starting out.
And you know what? One of the most interesting takeaways from your sources is that you don't need to be a Wall Street whiz to invest well. In fact, trying to time the market can actually backfire even for the pros.
So what's the alternative? Index funds. Basically, they're like baskets of stocks that track a specific market index, like the S&P 500. So instead of trying to pick individual stocks, you're investing in a whole bunch of companies at once.
So instant diversification.
Exactly. And because they're passively managed, the fees are usually way lower than those actively managed funds,
Yeah.
which can eat into your returns.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of trying to beat the market, I just got to ride the wave with an index fund.
You got it. And there's even a model based on this whole idea, the Swensen model. It's named after this guy, David Swensen, who's basically an investing legend.
Okay, so what's so special about this Swensen model?
Well, it's all about building a super diversified portfolio that includes different asset classes like U.S. and international stocks, bonds, and even a little bit of real estate.
Oh, that's interesting. And I think I've heard of something else that sounds kind of similar, life cycle funds.
Yeah, those are kind of like index funds, but they're even more hands-off. They automatically shift your investments as you get closer to retirement, moving from more risky stuff like stocks to more conservative stuff like bonds.
Oh, that's smart. So if I'm young, I can afford to take more risk, but as I get closer to needing the money, I want to play it safe.
Exactly. It's a great set it, forget it approach.
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready to tackle the student loan debate?
Ooh, yeah.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that aggressively paying them off might not always be the best move, and honestly, that kind of goes against everything I thought I knew about debt.
I know, right? It's a common misconception. But think about it this way. When you're young, you have time on your side, time for your investments to grow.
So all that compound interest magic everyone's always talking about.
Exactly. And if you're throwing every extra penny at your loans, you might be missing out on that growth potential, especially if your interest rates are relatively low.
Okay, so maybe it's not about being totally debt-free, but more about striking a balance between paying off loans and actually investing.
Right. A hybrid approach can be much more strategic in the long run.
Wow, this is seriously making me rethink my entire financial strategy. Which brings us to another biggie, real estate. The sources we've got here aren't exactly painting it as the foolproof investment everyone thinks it is.
Yeah. I mean, we've all heard that owning a home is the key to building wealth, but there's a lot more to this story.
Like what?
Well, there's this economist, Robert Shiller, who's done a ton of research on housing prices. And guess what? He found that from 1890 to 1990, real estate in the U.S. actually had a 0% return after inflation.
Wait, 0%. But don't property values always go up?
That's what we're told.
Yeah.
But Schiller's research shows it's not that simple. There are definitely times when real estate does really well, but there are also periods when it just flatlines or even goes down.
Okay, so it's not a guaranteed win. Got it. But even if my house does go up in value, what else am I not considering?
All the hidden costs,
Right.
property taxes, maintenance, repairs, insurance, it all adds up.
True. And I guess there's also the whole opportunity cost thing. Like, if all my money is tied up in the house, I can't invest it in other things that might have a better return.
Exactly. So it's not really about renting versus owning. It's about figuring out what makes the most financial sense for your specific situation.
That makes a lot of sense. So how can people figure out if buying a home is the right move for them?
One of the sources you sent actually mentioned a tool for the New York Times that lets you compare the costs of renting versus buying based on your own situation. It factors in stuff like mortgage rates, property taxes, even predicted changes in home prices.
Oh, that sounds super helpful. I got to check that out. Honestly, this whole deep dive is already making me see things in a whole new light. You know what else really stood out to me from all this research? The emphasis on negotiation.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Like, it's a skill that can really pay off big time, literally.
Totally. One of the articles specifically talks about salary negotiation, which I know can be super scary, especially for people who are just starting out.
It's definitely intimidating, but I think the key is to reframe it in your mind. Instead of thinking of it as like begging for more money, think of it as a conversation about the value you bring to the company.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about me, me, me. It's about how I can help them succeed.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to do that is to really highlight your accomplishments and tie them back to the company's goals.
So instead of just listing off my skills and experience, I should be focusing on the results I've achieved and how those results can benefit the company.
You got it. Show them what you can do for them.
The articles also talk a lot about the importance of preparation before going into any negotiation.
Oh, yeah. Preparation is key. You
Mm.
got to know your worth. You got to understand the market rate for your position and the company's financial situation. And it doesn't hurt to know a little bit about the person you're negotiating with, too.
So don't just wing it.
Definitely not. The more prepared you are, the more confident you'll feel, and the more likely you are to get what you want.
There's this awesome story in one of the articles about a woman named Rachel who used these tactics to negotiate a 28% salary increase. That's amazing. What was her secret?
She did her homework. She researched everything she could about the company, the hiring manager, the specific skills they were looking for. And she came to the table with a clear plan and a really strong argument for why she deserved that higher salary.
So it wasn't just about demanding more money, it was about showing them how she could help them achieve their goals.
Exactly. She knew her worth, and she was able to back it up with evidence.
That's such a great example. Okay, so we've covered student loans, real estate, and salary negotiation. Now let's talk about another big purchase that can really put a dent in your wallet. Cars.
Cars are interesting because one of the most surprising takeaways from your sources is that the length of time you own a car actually matters more than getting the absolute best deal.
Really? So it's not all about haggling and squeezing every last penny out of the salesperson.
Haggling is definitely part of it. But the real savings come from buying a reliable car and driving it for as long as you can, like ideally 10 years or more.
10 years? Wow. I feel like most people I know trade in their cars way before that.
And that's how they end up losing money. Depreciation is one of the biggest costs of owning a car, and the longer you hold on to it, the more you spread out that cost.
So it's kind of the anti-new car smell philosophy.
Exactly. It's about shifting your mindset from always wanting the newest, shiniest thing to appreciating the value of a car that just works.
Okay, so let's say I'm on board with this whole long-term ownership thing. Are there any tips for actually saving money when I do buy a car?
Absolutely. One strategy is to try to negotiate at the end of the year when dealerships are often trying to hit their sales targets.
So timing is key.
What else? Do your research.
Hmm.
There are websites like fightingchance.com that can show you the dealer's invoice price so you know exactly how much they paid for the car.
Oh, that's awesome. So I can go in knowing exactly how much wiggle room there is.
Yep. And don't forget to factor in things like fuel efficiency and insurance costs when you're choosing a car.
Good point. Those can really add up over time. All right, so we've talked about student loans, real estate, cars. What about another major expense that often sends people into a financial tailspin? Weddings.
Weddings are a perfect example of how societal pressure and emotions can lead to some serious overspending.
It's true. There's this whole expectation of having this perfect fairy tale wedding. And it's so easy to get caught up in all the Pinterest boards and Instagram posts.
But just like with any other big purchase, you got to be a conscious spender when it comes to your wedding.
So how do we avoid starting our married life in a mountain of debt?
It all starts with setting a realistic budget and sticking to it. And just like we talked about with cars, think about what's truly important to you.
So maybe instead of having a huge, extravagant reception, we opt for a smaller, more intimate celebration.
Exactly. It's about focusing on what really matters, creating meaningful memories, and starting your marriage off on the right foot financially.
I love that. Now I'm curious how we can apply these same principles of conscious spending to any large purchase, because it's not always about cars or weddings. Sometimes it's a dream vacation or a home renovation.
Absolutely. The principles are the same. Whether you're planning a trip around the world or finally getting that dream kitchen, you got to be intentional with your money.
So where do we start? How do we actually make those big purchases without totally blowing our budget?
Well, I think it starts with really understanding what you value and then making sure your spending aligns with those values.
Okay, so before I even start looking at travel websites or picking out paint swatches, I should sit down and really think about what matters most to me in this purchase.
Yeah, exactly. Ask yourself questions like, what am I really hoping to get out of this? What are my absolute must-haves and what are just nice-to-haves? Where am I willing to compromise?
So basically, it's about setting clear priorities and being realistic about what I can actually afford.
That's it. And once you have a good handle on your goals and your limits, you can start to create a plan.
And I'm guessing that plan involves a budget, right?
Of course. Just like with weddings and cars, a realistic budget is key for any big purchase.
But how do I actually stick to the budget once I set it? It's so easy to get tempted by all those upgrades and extras.
That's where automation comes in again. Remember, we talked about setting up automatic transfers for savings and investing. You can do the same thing for big purchases.
Oh, I see. So if I'm saving up for a trip to Italy, I can set up an automatic transfer to a dedicated Italy trip account every month.
Exactly. It makes saving so much easier because you don't even have to think about it.
That's brilliant. But even with a budget and a savings plan, things come up, right? Like unexpected expenses.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you plan ahead and build in a little cushion, you'll be in much better shape to handle those unexpected costs without derailing your whole plan.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. Honestly, I feel like I have a whole new perspective on personal finance.
And that's what we're all about, giving you the tools and knowledge to take control of your money and create a life that's both financially secure and personally fulfilling.
Okay, I have one last question for you. Now that we've covered all these practical tips about budgeting, saving, investing, what's one maybe unconventional way people can use their money to create that richer, more fulfilling life?
You know what's really powerful is that once you have a solid financial foundation, money can become a tool for creating positive change in the world. Not just for yourself, but for others.
I love that. So it could be like donating to a cause you care about, supporting a local business, or even helping out a friend or family member who's going through a tough time.
Exactly. It's about using your resources to make a real difference and build a legacy that goes beyond just accumulating wealth.
That's such a great note to end on. And speaking of resources, we want to encourage everyone to check out some of the stuff we mentioned today, like Ramit Sethi's website. He's got tons of amazing information on everything from budgeting to investing to negotiating.
And remember, building wealth is a journey. It's about making smart choices, taking action, and enjoying the ride along the way.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into personal finance. We'll see you next time.